I think the beginning of the decline in quality of the MCU started with the release of 2019's Captain Marvel. I hadn't planned on going to see the film at the time when it came out because I didn't think it was made for someone like me. Kind of like how Brie Larson had said that A Wrinkle in Time wasn't made for a 40-year-old white dude.
It wasn't made for him.
But at the time, I figured I'd go to see it so you guys didn't have to. Since this film was released, the MCU has had a few mediocre outings, like the TV series Falcon and the Winter Soldier, WandaVision, and the truly dull and boring cinematic release of Black Widow. So let's take a look back now at where it all went wrong with Captain Marvel.
As you can probably imagine, given my previous coverage of the film, my expectations were in the toilet going to see this. I expected it to be watchable, but very meh, and my expectations were met perfectly. It's watchable, but very meh, and comfortably among the worst films in the MCU. I'll give a brief rundown of the plot before diving into the themes of the film, the often not so subtle subtext. Spoilers ahead. Brie Larson plays a character called Veers, though later on Earth she discovers she's actually Carol Danvers, a human Air Force pilot. Anyway, the film begins with Veers in the impressive CGI city of Hala on the Kree homeworld. As a Kree warrior fighting an ongoing battle against the shape-shifting Skrulls, she has some extra special abilities, which are kept in check by a device placed on the back of her neck. She trains with Jude Law's character, Jan Rog. She's occasionally haunted by dreams of another life. Something has happened to her, and she can't quite recall her past. She visits some kind of sophisticated virtual reality system where she speaks to the Supreme Intelligence, played by Annette Bening. For whatever reason, everyone who speaks to this intelligence sees a different physical representation, a different person every time, someone from their past. The opening of the film actually held my interest, believe it or not. The battle with the Skrulls on a nearby planet and the visual effects are very impressive. Unfortunately, as soon as she arrives on Earth after escaping from a Skrull vessel, the film falls pretty flat thereafter. Veers crashes into a Blockbuster Video, encounters members of S.H.I.E.L.D., younger versions of Nick Fury and Phil Coulson, made possible by seamless de-aging CGI that's now been impressively perfected. After they have their initial introductions, Veers chases a Skrull on board a train. This whole sequence is pretty decent, but the moment it ends, the film becomes very pedestrian in terms of pacing and tone. The only thing that stopped me from nodding off in this film is the fact that I went to see it in 4DX. The occasional jolts in my chair, a splash of water here, some wind effects there, it was enough to keep me awake because boy, does this thing get boring. Veers finds a crystal containing her memories that the Skrull leader had attempted to extract from her. He infiltrates S.H.I.E.L.D. and tells Fury to work with her. In some continuity retconning, S.H.I.E.L.D. is referred to by its abbreviation, which, as we know, it wasn't in 2008's Iron Man when all of this began. It was referred to by the full title, Strategic Homeland Intervention, Enforcement and Logistics Division. This film takes place in 1995, so this would appear to be a continuity break. Anyway, the investigation by Veers and Fury takes them to a military base, Project Pegasus. In the records room, they find out that Veers is actually Carol Danvers, an Air Force pilot who tested a prototype aircraft for Dr. Wendy Lawson. Both of them apparently died in a crash. The trail takes them to Louisiana, where they encounter a former friend of Carol's, fellow Air Force pilot Maria. They attempt to reconnect while also piecing together the events that led up to the crash. Carol was a kind of surrogate aunt to Maria's daughter. Anyway, the big twist is that the Skrulls, led by Talos, are actually not the villains at all. They've lost their homeworld because they refused Kree rule. This is all proven from a recording Talos has from the black box of the aircraft Carol crashed all those years ago. So Carol has been on the wrong side this whole time. Carol's memories begin to return. Jude Law's character is actually the true villain, and he'd attempted to obtain the energy core of the aircraft's engine when he found it crashed on Earth. Dr. Lawson, real name Mar-Vell, had died in the crash. Carol shot the engine core to try to stop it from falling into Kree control, but she absorbed the energy, thus giving her the powers she has today. Long story short, after finding Mar-Vell's ship in orbit, a fight to protect the Skrulls and obtain the energy core begins. Carol eventually defeats the Supreme Intelligence and the remaining Kree. She then flies around in space, destroying torpedoes and ships with ease. She sends Jan Rog back to the Kree homeworld and leaves Fury with an intergalactic pager for emergencies. I guess what happened in New York in Avengers and the near destruction of planet Earth in Avengers Age of Ultron didn't quite count as emergencies. Carol agrees to help the Kree find a new homeworld. Oh, and the Tesseract was rather gratuitously and unnecessarily thrown into this film for some reason. And it's swallowed by a cat. That really isn't a cat. Also, that's how Fury loses his eye. The cat scratches it out, which makes this scene from The Winter Soldier just look really, really stupid.
Last time I trusted someone, I lost an eye.
So that's the film's basic plot. Carol Danvers lacks anything resembling charisma, and she spends most of the film either reacting to everything around her with one of three expressions on her face: a blank, emotionless one, a confused one, or a smug one. She seems incredibly bored and jaded throughout the entire film. In no way is she someone you could ever really care about or relate to. She's not likable or funny, despite the fact that her friend Maria keeps telling her that she's really funny. The character plays like some shallow, vacuous reality TV star. The entire performance just feels phoned in. As I expected, there is no heroic journey here. She doesn't undergo any kind of personal transformation, atonement, redemption, or moral or ethical self-discovery. As I said in a previous video, the origin stories of the likes of Tony Stark and Thor are much more compelling because they follow the tried and tested superhero archetype, and that's a good thing. Tony Stark was an arrogant narcissist who had to learn some harsh lessons, that the weapons he'd been building were causing immense suffering in the world, and this realization hits him square in the chest one day when he's injured by one of those weapons. He has to suffer a truly humbling experience and decides to change the direction of Stark Industries to become a force for peace and not for war. Like Thor in the first Thor film, he begins to seek redemption for his past sins. Thor's arrogant belief that he was entitled to the throne nearly cost him everything, and when he's banished by his father to Earth, he has to claw his way back up from the dirt. He's not even worthy to lift his own hammer. Audiences respond to superhero stories where small, self-centered characters become truly larger than life because they understand the value of selflessness. They learn about self-sacrifice and true heroism. They become better people, having realized the darkness and failings within them, taking responsibility for their past misdeeds or mistakes, and striving to become a better version of themselves, to become remorseful, humbled, and eventually role models. These characters began as a lump of clay and became molded by circumstances, trauma, or past mistakes into something extraordinary. Ant-Man isn't a great film, I will admit that, but unlike Captain Marvel, its humor works much better and it's actually got some real heart and sentiment to it. There's some great action set pieces and some truly fun moments, and Paul Rudd is always hilarious. Similarly, Scott Lang has to redeem himself, starting out as a petty criminal and becoming a hero, but ultimately, at the back of it all, his true personal quest was to be there for his daughter, to become a better father. Like Carol Danvers, Spider-Man didn't earn his powers. He was just bitten by a radioactive spider, and Carol just accidentally absorbed some energy. But Peter Parker quickly sobered up when he realized that there were serious consequences to his actions. With great power comes great responsibility. So he had to learn to not lose the run of himself, or people around him could get hurt. This is not the message in Captain Marvel. Carol Danvers was basically always amazing. Her friend Maria even tells her as much. She tells her that she was always a great friend, an amazing aunt to her child, she was always funny and strong. So in other words, Carol was perfect from the start. She just lost some of her memories. And all that happens is that she gets back what she already had. She doesn't get anything new. She doesn't overcome a past mistake or learn some harsh lessons, or seek redemption, or salvation of some kind. She has all of this power now, and there's no mention of the immense responsibility that comes with that power. Such massive power could corrupt some people, but not Carol, because Carol's amazing and always was. She doesn't need to learn how to use it responsibly. She already knows, apparently. Once she stops letting the Kree, the Supreme Intelligence, the device on her neck, and Jan Rog from holding her back, then she can truly become the incredibly perfect and all-powerful superhero she was always meant to be. The hero she already was. The message of this film is a stock, standard feminist empowerment message. You're perfect the way you are, sweetie! As soon as the patriarchy gets out of the way, you'll get everything you're owed. At the end of the film, she tells Jan Rog that she doesn't have to prove anything to him. The message really is, I don't have to prove anything to anyone. This isn't the thinking of a hero. Carol does not learn anything about the value of anything. There's no personal challenge to overcome, and when she finally becomes all-powerful, she's literally flying through space, smashing into torpedoes like they weren't there, and flying through a massive spaceship, destroying it, cutting straight through it like it was butter. And the incredible CGI effects have no impact at that stage because it's all meaningless without character, without story, without conflict, without any difficulty or adversity. At a certain point, there's no challenge in it. The message is simply, she's being held back, and once she stops holding back and the oppressive forces keeping her down go away, she will be absolutely perfect and unstoppable and can do no wrong ever. And she'll know how to wield her powers. Every other hero has to learn through trial and error how to wield their powers, but like Rey using a lightsaber and the Force for the first time, Carol just kinda knows intuitively. Now, this could easily have been rectified. They could have given Carol a dark past, some guilt and regrets to work through. For example, they could have said, well, Carol fought on the wrong side of a war for years and killed many Skrulls, because she was radicalized by the Kree, which is true, I suppose. So why didn't the writers choose to go with the narrative that she has blood on her hands and must atone for her past? Even though she didn't realize she was fighting on the wrong side, that doesn't change what she did. Now, that's some level of self-awareness and character development. That's potentially an heroic journey. It gives the character an opportunity to reevaluate her past actions. Now, of course, Carol does eventually fight on the side of the Skrulls, but you never truly get a sense of regret or a feeling of guilt on her behalf. She's not racked with a sense of inner turmoil. She never says to herself, oh my god, what have I been doing all these years? The reason for this is simple. If they had ran with that kind of character arc, it would have made Carol seem like less of a victim. Feminists want women to always be seen as the victim, so Carol cannot be allowed to take full responsibility for her past actions. She must always be painted as a victim of the Kree, the Supreme Intelligence, her parents who didn't encourage her, especially her father, the mean guys in the military who laughed at her because she couldn't climb a rope, the guy who told her that they'd never let her fly, Jude Law's character who tells her she's not good enough. In addition, Carol also encounters some casual sexism in her life. Some sleazy, stereotypical dude bro in a bar says to her, "You know why they call it a cockpit, right?" And another guy in the film tells her to smile. You know, toxic masculinity that feminists complain about. Really cringy stuff. Carol's friend Maria is the real Mary Sue in this film. These progressive, politically correct Hollywood films often take aim at the nuclear family. Carol has had past issues with her family, so in these kinds of films, water is considered thicker than blood. Unconventional families. She becomes a kind of aunt figure to Maria's daughter, and of course, Maria is a single mom. Probably the greatest single mom of all time. She's super badass, highly intelligent, independent. The actress even described the character as a person that you don't feel like you need to help. The father is of course no longer in the picture. We're never told what happened to him, but the theme of deadbeat dads is common in Hollywood films nowadays. But of course, if the female characters spend too much time talking about their ex-boyfriends and husbands, the film might have a harder time passing that all-important Bechdel test. At one point, Talos calls her a young lady, and she takes great offense at this. Young lady apparently is super triggering. Apparently being called a young lady is really bad. She must be neither of those things, I guess. She's tough and completely unrelatable, and is in no way feminine. And despite being a bit out of practice, she can fly basically anything. Well, at least Sam Jackson and Ben Mendelsohn deliver solid performances. The effects are good, but there's no real originality in the film. It's a very paint-by-numbers script. The villains are cardboard cutout characters, their motivations aren't fully defined and expanded upon. The entire affair is just predictable and safe. Meh is an accurate description of this film. But I'm feeling generous today, so I'll give it 5 out of 10. You're missing nothing by not seeing Captain Marvel. It's a profoundly mediocre film.